Hello and welcome to Switzer TV. I'm Peter Switzer, and today I want to talk to you about a really interesting product that's now listed on the stock market. It gives you access to private equity, which is quite unusual. I'll be talking to the CEO of Pengana Capital, Russel Pillemer. Thanks for joining us, Russell.
Thank you, Peter.
So give us a quick view of Pengana Capital so people can understand the company.
Yeah, so Pengana is a publicly listed funds management company. We specialise in providing our investors with good long-term returns with lower risk type of investments. We all know that with the magical power of compounding, that if you generate consistent good returns, then over the long term you'll end up with excellent returns, and that's what we aim to do at Pengana. We manage several different strategies in international equities, Australian equities, small caps, impact investing, ethical investing, etc.
So these are all various funds that people can have a look at to see whether they're interested in investing that kind of way.
Absolutely, and each fund is managed by a separate team of people, and so therefore the funds are not correlated with each other, and so you can add all of them into your portfolio without actually having these correlations.
Are they all listed or some are not listed?
So we only to date have two listed investments that people can get into. The others are unlisted unit trusts. So the listed opportunities are the Pengana International Equities, which invests in global equities, and it's got an ethical mandate. And secondly, the fund that we have in the market at the moment, which is the Pengana Private Equity Trust, which as we're currently raising money for.
And a lot of people would be curious about this, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's an equivalent fund on the stock market at this point.
No, there's not an equivalent fund. This is the first time that Australian retail and high net worth investors will have the opportunity to invest in private equity, global private equity, through a listed ASX vehicle.
Okay, well, most people think private equity is a situation where some really smart people with lots of money look at maybe a struggling or an up and coming company, and they throw money in it to get sort of share of it. They help drive it up to succeed, and eventually they might list it or will do a trade sale. How is this going to work? And because in many ways you're giving smaller investors a chance to participate like a private equity player, aren't you?
Absolutely. So I might just take a step back and just mention a statistic that I'm sure everybody will find intriguing and really forms the basis for what we're doing here. So if you looked at the US market in the year 2000, there were about 9,000 listed companies. Today, 19 years later, that number has almost halved. It's about 4,600. And what's happened there is if you're a small, medium-sized company in the US, and by that I'm talking about anything up to about a $2 billion market cap, which is strange for us because that's the mainstay of our market. But if you're one of those companies, you really don't want to be listed anymore. It's too expensive. You've got to do quarterly reporting. And so those types of companies, those smaller companies, have actually by and large exited the market. And so they've either gone private, or companies which would have gone public at that size have stayed private. And that is the type of opportunity that we're looking to invest in, that type of company. When this isn't venture capital, this isn't the risky end of the curve. These are good cash flow generating companies which are of medium size. Private equity firms have moved into the space to provide capital to these companies. Whilst they might not be listed, these companies, they still have capital requirements. And because private equity can do things outside of a public market, without the constraints of a public market, they tend to be able to do better in their investing. And we're bringing that skill and expertise and opportunity direct to Australian retail
and the
investors.
classic example is that when you're a publicly listed company, in America, you have to report every 3 months. And sometimes your decisions are based upon the fact that you have to maintain the share price, and you go talk to analysts all the time. But in these private equity funded companies, they can take a longer type view and create a really successful business as a consequence.
That's absolutely fundamental. And the other interesting factor is if you're operating in the private markets, you don't have to pay the highest price necessarily in order to be the winning investor. In public markets, you obviously do. And so what happens if you're a highly value-added investor, you can find the right deals and you can negotiate good terms. And we are hoping to invest with private equity firms who have that track record of being able to find deals and being able to successfully navigate them.
But people listening to this, Russell, will be saying, well, how does an Australian firm get access to all these American companies? Because they're going to be primarily American companies, aren't they?
Yes. So this is a fund-of-fund approach. Yeah. We will be investing in private equity funds globally around the world. Heavy emphasis on the US, but it is global. And it's all about access. So these same private equity funds who have had a couple of good vintages, good fundraisings and successful investing history, they tend to be able to do the same thing in the future. Yeah. And so it's all about accessing these private equity funds. These funds do not need anybody's money. They get inundated with capital every time they raise a new fund. It's all about access. And so we recognize that very early on in the piece, and therefore we have partnered with a group called Grosvenor Capital out of Chicago. Grosvenor are one of the foremost private equity investors in the world. They have about $20 billion invested in private equity in these types of funds, and they have been doing this for over 2 decades, and so they've got these great relationships and they can access, and it's all about having the access. And our investors through Pengana and Grosvenor will now have that access.
Yeah, and so you have access to lots of private equity funds and then lots of businesses that those equity funds are funding.
Absolutely. So we will invest in north of 50 private equity funds, probably more like 70 or so. Yeah. And when you looked through to the bottom of the portfolio, the amount of companies we will actually be investing in, there'll be in excess of 500 companies. So what we're trying to do here is not find the best private equity deal or the best private equity fund. We're trying to give investors exposure to private equity as an asset class and top ranking private equity or top quartile private equity.
And I guess how many companies did you say?
In excess of 500.
Yeah, so in that 500, if you get 5 that have Facebook, Netflix, and so Amazon potential, that could be a nice result.
Well, actually, what we're trying to do here is yes, it would be great to have those, but we're certainly not reliant upon those. So the success rate in our book is very high. We don't have many failures at all. And remember, all these companies are also cash flow generating companies. They're not venture capital risky type deals.
And private equity groups like to make money, and they watch their investment very closely, don't they?
Absolutely. The other thing which are also very keen on monitoring, and all of our managers who invest in are focused on, is gearing. Yeah. So you don't want to have too much gearing or too much debt on any of your companies, because when companies fail, it's very often because of debt. They have too much debt. So we keep the gearing levels down to acceptable levels.
Okay, and I'm kind of thinking to myself that if there was a stock market crash, the price is not going to be necessarily reflected because these aren't companies that are publicly listed.
That is correct. So we're all aware of the extreme volatility that we see in equity markets from time to time. Now, if a company's share price is up or down 10% in one day, is the value of that company truly changing by 10% in a day? It's more driven by supply and demand dynamics on the market. Our companies are all valued quarterly, at least, and they are valued by independent valuers at least once a year. And you're quite right in that we won't have the same volatility at all in our
there may well be a recession effect on these companies, but not an excessive speculative negative effect.
Absolutely. Now, that recession effect, and what we often get asked the question, what will happen if markets tank? What will happen to your private equity funds? Well, we find that our private equity funds in a troubled environment actually perform particularly well because the opportunities are in abundance. These funds can invest. They've always cashed up.
They're often buyers.
They're often buyers. Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so tell us about the investment team experience.
So our partners who are picking the fund managers to invest in is Grosvenor Capital. Yep. Grosvenor is based out of Chicago. Their firm is an alternatives firm specialist. Their history dates back to the early 1970s. Grosvenor are a global business. They manage in excess of $50 billion US dollars across their platform, which is all alternative investments. As I mentioned, private equity, it's about $20 billion or so. Grosvenor have in excess of 500 people in offices around the world. They don't have retail clients in their business. They focus on the institutional market. Their typical investor will be a sovereign wealth fund who comes to them and says, here's $500 million, build me a private equity portfolio.
Well.
Exactly. So our trust is like one of those other accounts that they have, like a big sovereign wealth fund, and they are customizing a portfolio for us according to our specifications, what we want to generate for our investors, and we will get allocated exactly the same deals as all the other big clients will.
Okay, so before we finish, give us the name of the fund again, the ticker code, and how they can actually find the information they need to know.
Absolutely. The name of the fund is the Pengana Private Equity Trust. The ticker is PE1, as in Private Equity 1, the first private equity, global private equity fund in the market.
It's funny that you take the number 1.
Absolutely. And if you want more information, you should go to our website, pengana.com or pengana.com.au, and otherwise call into our general number and you'll be able to get plenty of information.
Russell, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, that was Russell Pillemer, who's the CEO of Pengana Capital. I'm Peter Switzer. Thanks for joining us on Switzer TV.